Hi guys, so for today's class, we're going to be learning a new reading strategy. It's called Rereading the Text. So on your desk, you're going to see a copy of a poem written by Rupi Kaur. What I want you to do is begin underlining and highlighting anything that may stand out to you. Take note on the side if you would like. Take about 2 minutes to do that. The poem is only 6 lines, so it should be very, very fast. Then we're going to regroup as a class, and I'll tell you what today's objective is. So get going. Okay, class. So before we jump into the poem, I'm going to explain the rereading the text strategy a little bit more. So basically what you do is reread the text 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, as many times as you need to, so you can fully understand what the text says or what the author is trying to get you to notice. How many times have you watched a TV show or a movie, and the second time around you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I missed that the first time that I watched the movie? I know I have, just like many of you have. I see your hands raised, right? So, on top of rereading the text, there's a lot of elements that go into this strategy, and that's why I like it a lot. So, if you look at my PowerPoint, these are some of the reasons that you reread the text, and these are some of the things that you do as you're rereading the text. So now that we know some of the things that we do as we're rereading the text, why don't we jump into the poem? I'm going to reread the poem to you out loud. Even though you've already read it once yourself and you've marked some things, I really encourage you to even, again, mark things as I'm reading the text out loud, make note of things that you didn't the first time, and then we're going to regroup and we're going to break this poem down together as a class, okay? They have no idea what it is like to lose home at the risk of never finding home again. Have your entire life split between two lands and become the bridge between two countries. First generation immigrant Rupi Kaur. Okay, so now we're going to take this line by line and really reread the text. So within the first line, did anybody circle anything or underline? Caitlin underlined they. Right, so who's they? That's what I would have underlined, because we don't know who they is, and she doesn't mention they anywhere else in the poem. So why don't we circle that and we write who is they right next to it. Okay, on to the next line. To lose home at the risk of. What did you guys underline in this? Okay, Joe says that he underlined to lose home. I think that's a great thing to underline, because we don't know why she lost home. Was she forced out of her home? Did they kick her out of her home? So I made note of that on the side as well. So I'm just making note of all the questions I have as I'm reading this to help me figure it out in the end. On to the next line. Never finding home again. I underlined this entire line because it totally struck me as I was reading it. So, how would you feel if you could never find home again? If you were just never able to return to where you were brought up, where you were raised, so on and so forth. So next to that, I wrote, why won't she ever find home again? What is stopping her from doing this? Because we're kind of left in the dark as readers right now. We don't understand who they are. We don't understand why she's not home, why she can't find her home. It just doesn't make sense to us. Now let's move on. Have your entire life split between two lands end. So I didn't make note of anything in the margins for these two lines, but I do think there's stuff worth underlining if anybody wants to take a shot of that. Okay, Michael says your entire life. I think that's a good thing to underline too. Does anybody else have anything to add? Okay. Kayla thinks that we should also be underlining split and two lands. I think that totally makes sense, because now we're realizing that Rupi, if this is who the narrator of the poem is, Rupi's entire life is being split in between these two lands. That is definitely worth highlighting, yes. Okay, now we're going to go on to our final line. Become the bridge between two countries. Now we're going to make notes here, but first, what did all of you underline, circle, highlight, etc.? Okay, Nick says that he circled become the bridge. I agree with that there. What else should we underline in this line before we move on? Right, John says two countries, and I totally agree, because if we look at the line before, it says two lands, so maybe these two lands that she's talking about here refer to the two countries in this following line. Now let's make up a potential analysis for this line, just as we have for some of the other ones. Connecting her old life and her new life. Does anybody think that too? For a show of hands, does anybody think that that's what becoming the bridge might mean? I agree. Does anybody else have any other ideas that we can add to that too? Okay, Jason thinks that maybe she's stuck between her old home and her new home. Those are both great ideas, and I really think that's going to help us out in the end when we're trying to figure out an entire meaning. But there's one more line that we can't forget. First generation immigrant, Rupi Kaur. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. I think that that's the title of the poem. And this is important because if you know the definition of a first generation immigrant, which can refer to an immigrant or a foreign born resident who has relocated and become a citizen or a permanent resident of a new country, most of my family is comprised of first generation immigrants, so I know from personal experience. So that's a very important element to this poem, although it's put all the way at the end. Now maybe she wants us to read this multiple times, and that's why it's put at the end, because it makes it a little bit harder to figure out. So now, who has any potential ideas about what this poem can mean now that we've read it once on our own, when I had you guys underline for 2 minutes, then I read it out loud to you, then we went line by line, and now I'm going to read it one more time. Ready? They have no idea what it is like to lose home at the risk of never finding home again. Have your entire life split between two lands and become the bridge between two countries. First generation immigrant, Rupi Kaur. Now just take a minute or so, and I want you to brainstorm, and then I want some ideas when I get you guys back together. Okay? Go. Okay guys, you took your time. Now I want to hear some ideas. What do we have? Okay, Bridget has her hand up. What do you think, Bridget? Great. So Bridget thinks that the narrator of this poem is probably losing her cultural identity because she's now being forced to lose her home because of the country that she moved to. So now she feels like she's losing that identity because she's so far from the place that she calls home. I think that's a great analysis, and that's a great starting point. Does anybody else have any other ideas? It doesn't even have to be the entire poem. Maybe you have an idea of where she comes from. Maybe you know who they might be. Does anybody know who they might be referring to? Okay, Josephine, can I hear your idea? Okay, so they, according to Josephine, this is what Josephine thinks, they might be friends of the narrator or coworkers or just people around her who just don't understand her situation. So the narrator of this poem feels like she's losing her cultural identity and they don't understand it. Because in the first line she says they have no idea what it is like, and that's true, because if she's a first generation immigrant and she doesn't have anybody that she can relate to, she might feel alone because she has nobody to talk to about this and vent to other than maybe the family that she moved here with. So these are some great ideas from rereading this 4 times. And it wasn't so bad, right guys? Wasn't so bad. So just from 6 short lines, we came up with a whole potential analysis of the writer's life just by taking some notes and highlighting and underlining and putting all our thoughts together. So we caught some things that we didn't catch the first time. If you apply this to any other text in the future, you can find more than you would just from reading it once. I bet that after the first time reading it, when I told you to, you guys did not come up with all of this. So this works best with poems, short stories. It can work with novels, but this is easier. So with that being said, tonight for your homework, I want you to apply the rereading the text strategy to the other text that's on your desk. It's The Money by Junot Diaz. And then tomorrow I want you to return to class with your paper completely marked up like this. That way we can relate the poem that we read today and The Money, which is assigned tonight. So I can't wait to hear your ideas. We did a great job today in class. Good job, everybody.